time to move along. You're watching Q&A. The next question comes from Glenn Radford.
My question is this. Liberal backbencher Charmaine Stone has suggested that the party should introduce mandatory quotas to boost the number of women in federal parliament. What does the panel think of the quotas as a way to redress discrimination, and aren't quotas a form of reverse discrimination against those in the majority who have been selected on merit?
Let's hear first from the women on the panel. Lisa Wilkinson.
It's interesting that that question comes from a man, because maybe you'd have to be a woman to get, exactly what this is all about. And right now, I look at our federal parliament and I see one woman in our federal cabinet and 19 men, and if that alone isn't enough to tell you that women are not being selected on merit, because there are a lot of very talented women in the coalition who didn't get a look in. Tony Abbott said there's a lot of them knocking on the door. Well, Tony Abbott needs to understand they're not there to sell Avon. They've actually got talent that needs to be recognised. And there was also the argument put forward that they don't have the experience. Well, experience only comes when you get a chance in the first place, and that comes from taking a chance. And obviously for members of the coalition, they see it as a big risk, but there are very talented women in the coalition who really should get an opportunity. And the great pity about that 1:19 ratio is, for the first time, this country had a female foreign minister, and that was completely overlooked in Julie Bishop achieving that situation. Sorry, you want to speak?
I'm not arguing against that, but what I am arguing against is this idea of a quota system.
But the trouble is, if you don't have a quota system, it is clear that women end up being ignored.
That's right. Okay. Let's hear from now the women on the panel first. We'll come back to you in a minute, Senator. Sherry Maxson.
Look, the Treasury Secretary, Michael Parkinson, gave a really interesting speech recently where he said that the merit system isn't working because you have a lot of male bosses who, when they go to hire someone or choose their successor, they look for someone who looks like them, dresses like them and acts like them. We know the merit system isn't working, and we haven't had an improvement in women equal pay or women in senior positions at companies for the past 25 years. So I think at this point, the only way we can actually force cultural change is to have quotas. And whether we first give ourselves like a 5 or 10 year period where we set targets and see if companies can, out of free will, get women into those positions, I don't mind, I'd be happy with that. But then if it's not working at the end of that 5 or 10 year period, we've got to bring in a quota. And I would also say I'm really happy that Ita Buttrose, who previously had been against quotas, in her final speech when she finished up as Australian of the Year, she now supports it as well because she recognises that the world's not changing.
Marcia Langton.
Quotas work. We know this from history. We know this from, for instance, the affirmative action quotas in the United States with African Americans. Those quotas worked. They became very unpopular on the basis of arguments that really were not evidence-based. And when quotas were removed, we found that the proportions of African Americans in, say, student bodies slipped backwards. So it's pretty clear from a lot of the evidence that quotas do work, and it's also true, as Shari says, that the merit system doesn't work for women and minorities. So, if the Liberal Party were to think about quotas for women, I'm sure a lot of women in this society, including myself, would be pleased to see more women in Cabinet and more women in Parliament.
Chris Bowen.
I think the argument about quotas versus merit is a false one, because, as Lisa said, that would imply that there's only one woman in the Liberal Party in the federal Parliament who's got enough merit to be in the federal Cabinet. And in fairness, I don't think that's true. And knowing them as I do, there are plenty of women in the backbench in the Liberal Party who could very easily earn their place by merit in the Cabinet, and they've been passed over. The second point I'll make is this. I've got no doubt George is about to say quotas are bad. There are quotas in the Liberal Party as we speak. Tony Abbott would have weighed up. I've got to have enough members from the House of Representatives and enough members from the Senate in the Cabinet. I've got to have each state represented. I've got to have small L Liberals and Conservatives represented. The National Party's got to be represented. They're all quotas. They're all quotas. And yet it wasn't good enough to say, well, we need a few more women than one. And I think that's very disappointing for the country.
George Brandis.
Well, I agree with the view that the gentleman who asked the question expressed. I think that if you're against, discrimination, then as a matter of logic, you've got to be against reverse discrimination. And Chris, you correctly anticipate I am against quotas, and I don't think you do justice to a number of other women ministers in the government, like Senator Maurice Payne, Susan Lee, Senator Michaelia Cash, Senator Fiona Nash. You disregard the fact that Tony Abbott put a woman in charge of the House of Representatives, a formidable woman, Bronwyn Bishop. You disregard the fact that one of the most powerful people in Canberra is the person Tony Abbott chose to be his Chief of Staff, Peter Credlin. There are so many women working as advisors in the Prime Minister's office, each the personal choice of Tony Abbott. I don't think your comment does justice to those considerations.
Can I just ask
well.
you this, though? When you sit in the cabinet room and you look around at all the male faces and you come across one woman, do you
Well,
really...
I sit across from Julie Bishop, actually,
Okay,
so I look at Julie Bishop.
All right, so you see her quite
Maybe
often,
that's the
but
problem.
you'd have to look twice
to
for
put
there to
you
be
opposite
two of her,
men.
and there aren't. There's only one.
Well,
so here's the thing.
yes.
Does it seem to you... Does it seem to you to be a fair representation of Australian society?
Yes, I think it is, because the Liberal Party is gender blind. The Liberal Party is gender blind. You go into a pre-selection, you go into a pre-selection in the Liberal Party and the National Party, and I have never seen an occasion in which the female candidate was discriminated against because she was female. If anything, it is an advantage in a pre-selection, on my side of politics at least, to be a female candidate. I think you have to also look at the root of the problem. Fewer women offer themselves for parliamentary service than do men. And that's the case on both sides of politics.
think Lisa Wilkinson wants to get in on
the
that.
reason for that might be because we haven't had enough female politicians over the last century who've put forward women's issues and made sure that things like childcare are looked after and domestic violence issues are raised.
Well,
and
I don't
all
think
of the things that are much more female-focused issues.
I don't think that you have to be a female politician to put those issues on the agenda, and don't forget...
But that's the problem. Men are clearly not putting them on the agenda because women wouldn't be so heavily represented when it comes to domestic violence figures.
One of the most...
Childcare wouldn't be the issue that it currently is. Maternity leave wouldn't be the issue that it has been for such a long time. It's great to see that Tony Abbott has turned around there. But,
Lisa, I'm going to interrupt you
well,
because we have several people with their hands up in the air, and we'll just quickly go to a couple of them. That lady there, and then there's a gentleman just 3 seats down, just behind the sound recorders. Go ahead.
Anti-Discrimination Commissioner Elizabeth Broderick said that if you don't include women, you contribute to excluding them. Thank you.
Okay, we'll take that as a comment. And this gentleman down the front there wanted to get in as well.
Yes, what I ask the panel is it the right thing to try and change the culture of a population through legislation? What the panel think?
Once again, we'll take that as a comment. And we have one more question on the